I'm just one person, but again, just one person can make that difference in using your voice. So I think that's all it takes, like you don't feel like you're just one person, you don't have the agency to do something, but you do.
Hi there, I'm Bex Craig and you're listening to the Not Just Anything podcast for women who want it whole. I hope you'll join me each week as we hear extraordinary stories from women around the world about how they have curated a whole life by design rather than by default. Today I'm speaking to Sarah Bagharib, who is a lifelong humanitarian, a TEDx speaker, founder of an empowerment community for women called Crazycat, a mum, an advisory member at the Singapore Muslim Women's Association, and a communications professional working for Médecins Sans Frontière. Sarah talks about her journey to discovering her purpose of lending a voice for those in need and how she works every day to strengthen her own confidence to lead the life that she wants. It's an open and honest conversation full of humility and humanity, and I hope you'll enjoy listening. A very big warm welcome to Sarah Bagharib, who is joining me today in Singapore. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm looking forward to sharing more and amplifying a bit more about your story. So let's get stuck in if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So the first question is the question of who are you, essentially? And the context for that is we talk a lot on this show about the labels that we give ourselves, the labels that society gives us, and this idea that we're not just anything. We're not just one thing. We are the sum of our parts. So how would you describe yourself, the person that you are, the story that has taken us to today?
Honestly, that's a loaded question. And this is something I ask women from all walks of life, when we feature them on our website, Crazycat, which is a media platform that aims to remind everyday women of their worth so they can shine. So I find it quite hard when someone's asking me the question in return, like, what's my story? But I think I'm a storyteller at heart. It's something that I find is at the core of everything that I do. I really believe that everyone has a story to tell, but as women, we tend to discredit that. We tend to second guess our story. We tend to, I have women who I ask to share their story and they're like, but I don't have a story to tell. My story is not significant enough. And I'm like, you don't have to have survived cancer or something to share your story, to have your story. So, what is your unique story? We all have our unique stories and our unique strengths. And that's really what it is. What is your truth? Because you don't know in sharing your story that someone else or another woman can relate to that or resonate with that. And that, your voice could be exactly what another woman needs to hear to help her shine.
Yeah. So your story is I'm a storyteller, and you said my purpose, my passion is really about lending a voice for people that might not have that voice yet. And so I'm wondering what got you to that realization that was something that you really cared about wanting to do.
Yeah, I just feel like I think that all comes from, reflection as well, and recognizing that I do come from a place of privilege. I'm the oldest daughter. I think all my life I've had a lot of support from my parents, and I'm very grateful for that. And just recognizing that there are so many things that are happening around the world, and some of these people just don't know how to use their voice. That's one thing, and they just don't have that platform to be able to use the voice. And right now, currently, I'm also a humanitarian. I work for an international medical humanitarian aid organization, and this is, I do communications for the organization. So really, I think just realizing that I have that privilege to be able to use my voice and have that platform, whatever it is. I mean, right now, today, we have social media, and it's so easy that we can just use that platform however we want. And, I choose to use it for good and to amplify voices of these people who just don't have that voice. So I think it just stems from a place of knowing that I am really privileged and I should do something that I can about it.
I mean, what a beautiful, and also I get it's so modest as you're describing that, and yet it is so important, and everything from producing documentaries, undercover work to kind of extract some of that. Now you're a humanitarian and you've set up this empowerment group for women, and you're doing work for your community as well here in Singapore, and so there's a lot that you're doing, which I think is incredible. And so take me back to the documentary work, because I kind of want to go through how all of these things sort of come together as a puzzle, if you will. So tell me a bit about your first career, I guess, as a documentary producer and doing some of the work. What took you into that work to start with?
I always thought I was going to be a journalist, like a reporter. I thought like that was, in lending my voice, that was the way to do it, to be the one in front of camera and sharing the story, I realized that, okay, what I wanted to do is, lend my voice, but I was really going into factual programming, investigative journalism and all of that as well. So I just started looking out for that. And so happened that a BBC journalist named Michelle Hussein, someone I followed, still follow, and she tweeted about how she was doing a live talk show in Singapore and she was looking for a live studio audience. So I was like, yeah, of course, like this is an amazing opportunity. I mean, for that, I just wanted to be a live studio audience. So she replied to me and she said that, write into this person, and she left an email address. And then I realized, based on the email address, that I decided for some reason to look up that company who's making this production. Something just called me to reach out and say, hey, do you have any internship? I'm looking for interns. Do you have any internship positions available? And then the person replied and was like, you know what? We don't have anyone in Singapore. And we just would love to get that extra help. So then they called me on and I did an unpaid internship for about a week. So that's really where it started, because after that, they offered me a full-time position as a researcher. So the two founders of the company are also women, very strong feminists, and I think they're just role models and my mentors. And I've just been very grateful to have that kind of, those people who just believed in me and wanted me to succeed. And I think, that's the beauty of mentorship as well, opening doors for you and giving you opportunities. So while I was doubting myself a lot throughout my journey, they saw something in me and they were the ones who pushed me and like, okay, I think you're ready to produce this, or I think you're ready to do this and that. And so with the undercover story that I mentioned, it really was me learning about refugees and asylum seekers. I studied in Australia. I did my final year in Perth, and being a Singaporean all my life, born and bred here, the whole concept of refugees and asylum seekers at that point was completely new to me. And I was just impacted by the stories of these people who were forced to flee their countries because of, danger and all of that. And I thought, these are people whose voices need to be heard. So I did a bit of research of asylum seekers who were moving from, coming from, Middle East mainly, and they were going through Indonesia. And there are detention centers in Indonesia with appalling conditions. So Indonesia, is not a signatory of the UN Refugee Convention. So anyone who comes through, they're treated as illegal people. Then I realized that some of them were actually detained in just horrible places. And there was this whole story at that point with Australia and starting, I think they had the Operation Sovereign Borders. This was 2013 or 2014. So I was like, okay, this is a timely story. This is a story to tell. We hear from the refugees and we talk about, policy across different countries and all of that. And I pitched that to my boss at the time, who then said I should pitch it to Channel News Asia. It got commissioned. And that's just, I think a lot of this just helped build my confidence as I go along. And that's where it all started, really, and developed.
I mean, it's just so clear how much you care about people. And what I'm also hearing that I often talk to people about is like finding a way to connect your skills, the things that you have, which in your case was, well, I have this platform and I have this experience. And you did say at times I didn't feel that confident in my own, but I have it. And I also have this passion and purpose that I'm touched by and I know that I care about, and bringing those things together to create kind of this environment where we're doing something meaningful that's still drawing on our own capabilities and strengths, which I think is kind of amazing in many ways.
Thank you so much. And absolutely, I think that's what it is. But even through that, I'm just one person, but again, just one person can make that difference in using your voice. So I think that's all it takes, you don't feel like you're just one person and you don't have the agency to do something, but you do.
It's such an important point because it'd be such an easy option for us and such a seductive thing to think, I'm just one person. What difference can I make in this world? And yet, if every person believed that, then we wouldn't have had the people that have really moved mountains and made changes, and it might feel like something small. It might feel like it's not huge. And especially I think today there's this like belief that everything we do has to, we talk a lot about purpose and impact. And so people imagine that it doesn't count unless it's monumental. And yet it's about starting. It's about, it's about amplifying that first refugee story that you heard, and then the next one, and then the next one. And then all of a sudden you have this portfolio. Now you have this career where really you've been a driving force in humanitarian causes, whatever those look like. And so now you're still working in a humanitarian context. So sort of fast forward us from that moment where you've been really touched by this experience of uncovering some of these stories to where you are now.
Yeah, so I think, the story of my career switch is another one to tell, I guess, because I think 2016, I was really in this space where I realized and recognized that I've been struggling quite a bit in my job. I was recognizing that I was falling ill quite often when it comes to like post-production, going into edit, scripting and all of that. And my body was obviously telling me something. So this was 2016, I think in August, and it was actually 10 days before I got married. And my body decided to just shut down. I had a really high fever and I had to be hospitalized. Everything was happening at the same time. I was at the peak of in post-production, preparing for production for another documentary program. And then obviously, preparing a wedding and getting married. So I was just completely overwhelmed, I guess. And, sometimes when you're not caring for what's going on in your head, your body kind of just manifests. And obviously my body was saying, nope, you're done. You need to rest. And it just forced me to do that. So while I was in hospital, it was just really a viral fever that I had. But I think it was also just me not taking care of myself and not listening to a lot of different signs. But that experience really forced me to then do a bit of soul searching and dig deeper into, okay, what is really going on here? Because it's a pattern. I've noticed that I've always been falling sick when I go into edits. And I realized, I wasn't playing to my strengths. Like I noticed that I'm quite good at, doing the interviews, getting the stories, getting people to trust me and connect, to be able to open up and share their stories. But then when it came to scripting and visually putting things together, like I wasn't as good as that. And I struggled with that quite a bit because I'm like, while my colleagues are having it so easily, it came so naturally for them, but it didn't for me. And there was, again, a lot of like imposter syndrome and self-doubt, like, oh no, I need to do something to make it better. But clearly my body was just like, no, you're doing your best and you're doing hard enough. And you may think that it's not good enough, but maybe it's because this is not meant for you. This is not what you're meant to do. So then I went back again to my purpose and what it is, and that is to lend my voice. And before this, I thought that I had to be a journalist, and that's the only way that I can lend my voice. But then when I thought about it again, it doesn't really matter whatever occupation, whatever job you're doing, as long as, you're still serving your purpose. So then I started thinking about, maybe I could look into communications.
Yeah. And I'm so fascinated because there's been a sort of a pull through in this conversation, which is I connected to my purpose. And you've said that a few times, like, then I took a moment and I was like, wait a minute, what's my purpose? So how did you land, firstly, just for people that are sitting thinking, I wonder how you get to that point? Like, how did you land on that's what it was? And then how do you pull yourself back to remind yourself of that at these moments that are, sort of like crisis moments where you're like, oh gosh, my body is telling me all this stuff and it's not feeling right. Okay, check in with your purpose and then redesign.
I think what I did clearly was reflection. And I think not many people do that as well. Like, you bulldoze through life, you do this and that and that and that. And you don't take the time to pause and just take stock of everything that's been going on. And I think for me in that position, like I was obviously forced to pause and rest while I was in hospital. And I really had nothing else to do but to just look within and then reflect. And I think burnout is real. It's something that a lot of people face as well. And I hope that we don't get to a point of burnout to then reflect and take stock of everything that's been going on in life. So I think it's really important that we, even in a week, like once a week, do something to reflect on that week and what's been happening. And yeah, there's just so much value in self-reflection. And it's something that I really advocate for as well.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about this with people because I think that I was even sharing on another podcast that we with our nonverbal communication, we're always saying to people, look at people's body language, observe their nonverbal cues. There's a lot of information there. And yet we don't do that for ourselves. We don't stop and we're like, wait a minute, what are the nonverbal cues here? There's plenty of information in my head. And actually that's another piece that I think I've heard from you a lot. And I watched your TEDx talk, which for listeners listening, I would really recommend. Sarah talks a lot about self-doubt. And you talk about this voice gene. And I'm just curious about this because I'm familiar with what it's like to have voices, as a coach, and I see this a lot. Talk me through how, when you realize there is something at work inside me that is creating this sense of self-doubt, and what some of the strategies are that you have maybe designed over time to support yourself.
Honestly, I'm still dealing with it and I'm still struggling with it. And I think I've kind of accepted that I'm always going to be on this journey of battling, my self-doubt and my inner voice. But honestly, like a lot of it is personal agency. I've dealt with anxiety since I was 17. Honestly, didn't know that I've had anxiety then. I thought it was just, a physical breathing problem, or like I was going to have a heart attack or something. Because at that point, I think we didn't have the conversations that we're having now about mental health and trying to normalize those conversations. So I think for me, like self-doubt, whenever I spiral and all that, it leads to panic attacks. And I just always never knew how to manage and all that. So one of the other things that have really helped me is therapy. I speak to someone about it, and there's really absolutely no shame in doing that. Because you know that it's something you're going through, and ask for help. Like in any situation, as a mom, you don't feel like you need to have it all. Like it's absolutely fine to ask for help. It takes a village to raise a family, right? So yeah, for me, like in terms of taking care of my mental health, when dealing with self-doubt and everything, therapy has been something that has really helped me. But again, it's a lot of, positive self-talk, which I am still working on as well. It's difficult when, you're overwhelmed and you're like, you have all these voices in your head saying you're not good enough, you can't do it. No, I think for me, what I'm trying to live by is to choose courage over comfort. All these moments when I am doubting myself, I'm like, oh, okay, it's so easy to just be like, yeah, I suck, and like, I'm not good enough, and just like, live by that. But it really takes a lot more to then, say, hey, no, I'm going to rise above this, and I'm going to choose courage. And you'll cry, you'll shake. It's very uncomfortable, but sit with the discomfort, because that's the place where you'll grow.
Thank you for going there and for normalizing this, because I think, most of us have this at some point in time, and maybe others have it all the time. And like you've just described. And I'm kind of wondering, when this shows up for you now and how you choose, like, is there an example that you have of a recent time where you've noticed this, like these voices in your head, and how you've stepped into that courage, how you've activated that courage over comfort?
Just taking it a step at a time has helped, but I am still dealing with it. And I think the other thing as well is recognizing and embracing that I am a minority woman. And in Singapore, it's really interesting where, we live in a multicultural society, and we're taught to all our lives to tolerate really other cultures, other religions, and all of that, but not really go to the next level of really understanding and accepting the differences and what that means. So I think for me, it took me a while to come to a space where I can fully embrace that I am a minority woman, even though that's a truth that I've been living with. But I've realized that I've always kind of like try to hide that, and try not to make it apparent or a limiting belief. And it's not a limiting belief, because, I'm still doing all that I do despite being a brown woman. But at the same time, I'm realizing that structurally, it's quite different. The playing field is not level for ethnic minorities, or just, minorities in society. And again, for women, where the playing field is not level between men and women, and then we go again and lay it down for, ethnic minority women, it's a whole other, the playing field is just not level. And so I've taken it upon myself to say, look, like representation is everything for people who look like me. Growing up, in the media industry, I've always tried to look out for role models who look like me, and there are not many. I have a voice. I want to use it and represent my community, and I'm not trying to divide, and say like, hey, I'm a brown woman and this and that or whatever it is. I'm not trying to divide, but to just say that this is our lived experience and it's different from yours. And again, coming from a place of privilege in that sense, I don't have that ethnicity privilege. But if you have that privilege, then use it to open doors for minority women or minority people. So I think that's taken me quite a bit. It's still, talking about it is still uncomfortable, and I still find myself shaking and my voice shaking when I do that, because it is not something that many people are talking about as much in this part of the world. In the West, yes, of course, we can't compare the kind of systemic racism that's happening in the US to what's happening in Singapore. Obviously, we can't, but we shouldn't invalidate and discount the lived experiences of minority people in Singapore and in this part of the world.
I mean, I'm touched by and can feel the passion that you have for this. It's very clear that this is something that touches something within you. And I'm really appreciating the way that you frame the nuance between tolerating and more fully embracing what a diverse group of members in a community can actually bring. And so I'm wondering how this all fits into your whole life. We talk a lot about this and what a fulfilled life looks like, what a whole life looks like, the sort of life that we know is one that we're choosing to live, that we're designing. How do you think about that?
I think for me, what a full life would be embracing wholeheartedness. I think I've been reading a lot of Brené Brown. I don't know if you have.
Love
She's
her.
Like guru of
She is.
of everything,
Yeah.
and just living my most authentic life, being able to be who I am. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and it's hard, like trying to feel like I have to deny certain parts of myself because I want to please someone or whatever it is. So just really learning to embrace wholeheartedness and living the most authentic life and serving life according to my own purpose. I think that is what a full life would be for me, would look like for me. And being a mom, being an employee, an entrepreneur, a sister, a wife, a daughter-in-law, a daughter, all of that. It's a lot. And I don't think there'll ever be a right balance. I don't think we'll ever find a right balance, but I think what I'd like to think of it as is finding the right rhythm. So whatever that works for me. Yeah, like if it's asking for help, I have a lot of help and support, and I'm really grateful for that, but it's not something that I have right now, I have to say, but it's something I'm working towards. I mean, my daughter is still 21 months old, so I'm still at this space where I'm reconciling, being a mom and all these dreams and aspirations that I have and what that looks like. It hasn't been easy, but I think I'm just on that journey and appreciating that I am on a journey, and growth is not linear, and just embracing everything that comes with it.
Yeah, and it is a journey. I mean, all of these things, I think it's dangerous for us to present as though, well, what does it look like to live a fulfilled life? And then that's a destination point. The fact is, it's something that we need to constantly curate and design and take into account. And, I love that you reframed balance around rhythms, because for me, it's not nuanced enough. It's not complex enough to describe all of the things that come into our lives that we need to account for. So it's limiting. Even in that word, it limits our perception of how we can think about what we want in our life. But I'm so grateful for this conversation. And I'm just wondering, like, as we leave listeners today, what are some of the last thoughts that you want to share, or words of advice, or things that you'd love them to consider for themselves?
I think, mainly for women who are listening to this, just truly recognize your story if you haven't, and own it, embrace it, and then share it. Because you really don't know who'd be able to resonate with your story and who needs to hear that at the moment. And we tend to discredit our strengths. We tend to doubt ourselves. And again, like I said, I'm always going to be in that space, I think. But to just have your own agency to say, I'm going to rise above that. I'm going to choose courage over comfort. That's what I think we should at least try to do for ourselves. And because if we don't, that we're just, doing ourselves disservice and not giving, not enough justice of whatever it is that we can potentially achieve and live life to our fullest potential.
Yeah. And I love that you framed that in like, that's also in a way a disservice to the people that need to hear your story for themselves.
Yeah.
I part of the reason that I wanted to interview people all over the world and speak to women living all sorts of different lives for this podcast was because although we consider our lives to be very ordinary, there is extraordinary in ordinary. And we know that, that there is power in storytelling, like you've said the whole way through this conversation. And if we give ourselves permission to own our story, to share our story, we do the same for countless other people, including our children, including our partners, including our communities, including other women. And when more people start to take ownership of that, the impact is immense, as you have just described in your own story. So I love that I feel like we've come full circle in this importance of storytelling, and that's a very clear message for people to hear today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I think if I can add one more thing, it's exactly what you said, that it is about creating a cycle, right? And for me, like, and what I hope to achieve with Crazycat is to create a cycle of strength and confidence from one woman to another. And that's exactly how it is, like you said, from us using our voice to then inspire a younger generation who will then continue that cycle of strength and confidence from one woman to another.
Oh, all warm and fuzzy. Perfect place for us to end. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah, today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to share my story, which I don't do quite often.
I know you were in the hot seat, but you did beautifully.
Oh, thank you. So did you.
Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Not Just Anything for Women Who Want It Whole. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to our weekly podcast and leave us a review. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here with us, and we look forward to having you join again. And remember, be brave, be whole, be you.